Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome to the stage the Director of Partnerships at Games for Change, Susanna Pollack.
Hello. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the last couple of days of great sessions and play and truth-telling. We're really looking forward to this afternoon's sessions. Michael Levine will be joining us in just a few minutes, and he's put together, along with the Joan Ganz Cooney Center, a great program for the next couple of hours on learning. I also want to remind everyone, in the next break, when we do break, I think it's at 2, to go outside and use a truth box. I'm sure a number of you have pledged to Dan Ariely that you would go tell your lie. And the truth box is going to be closing at around 2:15, so this next break will be your last chance to do it. So I hope you enjoy this next session, and here is Michael Levine, Executive Director of the Joan Ganz Cooney Center.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Thanks so much to Susanna, Asi, and Victoria. Boy, has this festival come a long way in the last 10, 11 years. Let's give them all a hand for putting together a terrific show. I can't see you all very well. How many of you have been here from the beginning? Anybody? Yeah? Amazing. So I can't speak to the total trajectory of the festival, but since I'm a relative newcomer, 4 years ago, probably at my first Games for Change, probably because I wasn't sure if I would ever be back, I predicted that by 2015, every major philanthropy and government agency would have a games portfolio. In the health, environmental, civics, defense sectors, this is already true. At the Cooney Center, we're mapping and tracking these developments across sectors. We're developing analytical reports, partnering with industry to produce new models and investments, and promising prototypes, and convening leaders to mobilize the underlying social justice spirit that animates Games for Change. We've also just launched, I don't know whether any of you have seen it, please come and check out what we consider the first deep website to become kind of the go-to community for developers and investors. It's called gamesandlearning.org. So please check us out over there. In the learning and education reform space, I just wanted to tell you real quickly about these next two panels. Things are really beginning to hop. We're finally beginning to disrupt learning. This year, Games for Change has arrived, I think, at a very propitious time for educators, learning experts, and reformers. While school is out for just about everybody in a month or so, the national debate over the next wave of education reform and what learning in and out of school should look like is just really heating up. Nearly everybody, from economists to business leaders to the national PTA to members of Congress, the president, agree that the dismal educational track record of the past decade is sending millions of kids on a trajectory that is simply unassailable. In the face of global stiff competition, the alarm bells are ringing if we hope to sustain our leadership in innovation. And for me, more centrally, as a decent society, one that is devoted to opportunity for all. So here's some good news, though, and we'll be discussing this on the stage over the next couple of hours. Despite our mediocre performance in general and our neglect of young people living on the margins, I really do believe that there's reason to be optimistic. Never before have we had as many tools and instruments or the practical craft know-how we currently do to address the problems that plague so many schools and learning environments today. In particular, I think we've made some very exciting breakthroughs to help promote high-quality teaching and to address the lack of engaging content that has discouraged relevant and rigorous learning. And finally, and this is where I think games are particularly promising, we now have measurement engines and staff development and professional development tools which might help compel and incite in-depth, personalized learning. On the stage here this afternoon, we have some of the leading experts from across education, design, research, and philanthropy. And one of the nation's leading journalists, Kevin Bushweller, who heads Education Week's excellent Digital Directions publication. In about an hour, Kevin will lead a panel entitled Turning Fantasy into Reality, Building Games That Schools Need, and we'll be joined by Constance Steinkuhler from the University of Wisconsin, Alan Gershenfeld from Eline Media, and Jesse Schell, who's just been added to the program. We're very excited from from Shell Games. That panel will delve deeply into one of the biggest challenges for developers like yourselves and academic creators, game creators. How can we crack the K-12 distribution and adoption cycle and code? That panel will be the second treat for those of you who are attending this learning track that we've been curating at the festival through the Joan Ganz Cooney Center. In just a moment, you'll meet an extraordinary group of leaders I am proud to introduce from the city of Pittsburgh in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, in their really interesting effort in their fine town. A unique group of game development experts, technologists, teachers, and philanthropists are working across boundaries to create a new series of learning experiences and resources for all youth. These innovators have created what I think is a nationally scalable 21st century collaboratory that has, in their own words, remade learning. They'll also be recognized tomorrow at the Disruptive Innovation Prizes for their pioneering work. They all are inspired, they have all inspired a new conversation about connected and more playful learning that has been pioneered by folks who have graced the Games for Change stage over the past decade, including folks like Jim G. and Katie Salen and Jane McGonigal and Jesse Schell. So let me thank you all for coming and welcome the first panel this morning. I'm going to ask Gregg Behr from the Grable Foundation and Cathy Lewis-Long from the Sprout Foundation, from the Sprout Fund, who are leading this work to get us rolling. Gregg's going to come out in a second. We hope that you all find these sessions a compelling, highly interactive conversation. Thanks so much for coming and enjoy the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. I'm Gregg. I'm the executive director of the Grable Foundation in Pittsburgh, which is a private charitable foundation focusing on the well-being of kids. I'm also the father of a 2.5-month-old daughter who's sitting somewhere up there, along with a 5-month-old daughter. So if you hear little kids shouting and screaming, they're my kids. I apologize to you right away. So let me take you to the city of Pittsburgh, a city that some of you may think of as smoky and filled with steel mills, but a city that's totally transformed itself over the past 3 decades and has done so through medicine, through banking, by reclaiming its environment, and here today, notably, in learning and what it means to learn in a pre-K to higher education system. So let me take you to a very quirky, creative, and inventive place that we call Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I'd like to invite 3 of my colleagues to join us in helping to tell this story today. First, Ms. Cathy Lewis-Long, the Executive Director of the Sprout Fund. Drew Davidson, who heads the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon University. And Michelle King, who's a teacher at the Frick Environmental Charter School in Pittsburgh. So welcome.
Thank you.
So how many of you watched Fred Rogers when you were younger? So I grew up with Fred. In fact, when he passed, it's the only time that a public figure died that I sat up and cried in bed because he meant so much to me. But I knew him as a grandfatherly, loving person who appeared on my television, who I just loved to watch. But you could think about Fred entirely differently. Think about Fred in the 1950s taking advantage of this weird and wacky technology called television and finding ways to co-opt it for good. He knew it was attractive to kids, and how could he use it for educational and learning purposes? Well, today in our midst here in Pittsburgh and here in New York and elsewhere, we have modern-day Fred Rogers. They're gamers, they're technologists, they're roboticists, along with educators and librarians and museum exhibit directors, people who are finding common ways to reinvent what learning looks like in a school, in a museum, in a library, in community centers, and elsewhere. And in Pittsburgh, we have this network called the Kids+Creativity Network, about which Cathy will tell you. But more than 1,000 people strong. And they represent those fields that I just mentioned. They're gamers and roboticists, but they're also teachers and librarians. And they're remaking learning for kids in the most extraordinary ways. Importantly, we have key institutions supporting this work. We have the work of an educational service agency called the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, the really important work of Carnegie Mellon University. And it's not just the Entertainment Technology Center, it's the Human-Computer Interaction Institute, it's the School of Design, it's the Create Lab. There are all sorts of centers and schools on that campus that are contributing the R&D and the invention to make this happen in our museums, schools, and libraries. The work of the Sprout Fund and really leading this a group of 1,000, now 2,000 people who are advancing this work in incredible ways. And the Technology Council, bringing the entrepreneurs and the for-profit ed tech companies and related industry into the fold. So what does that look like for these kids? Well, it looks like this. This is a classroom in a public school in Pittsburgh. It's a wholly interactive simulator setting for kids to participate in not only STEM learning, but the arts. We really talk about STEAM learning in Pittsburgh, integrating the left and the right brain. It happens in a place like this after-school program, the Create Lab, working in a local school district, bringing the arts and robotics to kids in some special and extraordinary ways. We see it in a STEAM studio in an elementary school with about 90% free and reduced lunch students. We see it in this extraordinary classroom where a kindergarten teacher has worked with an artist to find ways to introduce circuitry to kindergartners in a way that's totally transformed not only science learning, but literacy learning in that school, in a school with 98% free and reduced lunch students. We see it when a first grade teacher and a technologist work together to create new digital blocks that are toys for kids. It's the equivalent of a child reading a book with a caregiver. What's the digital equivalent teaching math instruction? We see it in early learning centers and kids using digital cameras to capture their environment. We see it in places like the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh, introducing maker practices in extraordinary ways that are popping up all across the community. We see it in maker festivals. We see it in former retail spots where wonderful community activists are bringing STEM learning and STEAM learning into settings previously where kids didn't have access to this sort of thing. We see it in our community libraries. We see it in the community Y, at neighborhood and community festivals. We see it on theater stages. We see it in hip-hop labs. We see it even in bus stops, where the Fred Rogers Company, for example, worked with local designers to transform the simple practice of waiting for a bus into a game that kids could play with a caregiver adult in learning new words. But rather than showing you all these pictures, let me show you a brief video that explains this work. And later, we'll show you another video of this extraordinary classroom in a school district called Elizabeth Ford. This is a really important story. There are 7 small labs in western Pennsylvania. There are 14 in the whole country. These are rooms imagined with projectors coming down, displaying gaming on the floors. And the kids are learning predicates and fractions in a way that complements the instruction that happens in their classroom. Some of the results that we've seen in this school are extraordinary, and we'll tell you more about that story later. But let us tell you about the broader network and all of the work that's happening. More than half a century ago, children's television pioneer Fred Rogers made use of the technology of his day to inspire a generation of kids to play, to tinker, and to make believe. Today, new pioneers, gamers, roboticists, technologists, and designers are working alongside educators in and out of school to inspire and provoke creativity and curiosity among children and youth in the Pittsburgh region and across the world.
What kind of screwdriver are you using? So I am a resident artist at the Create Lab, which is part of the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. And I saw an opportunity to think about what technology education might look like for young children.
As opposed to children just using technology to explore, we want them to be producers of technology and create their own circuits and take apart toys and reappropriate their components for new expression.
Voila!
Labs is Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh's teen-only learning lab program. Teenagers from grades 6 to 12 are welcome in the library and our spaces. We try to create programming that speaks to interests that a teenager may have. We get to really customize it, work directly with the kids that we see. It's not home, it's not school, but it's a place where people of all ages can come and find something that they're passionate about.
STEAM Studio is a place where students are able to come and work collaboratively. They're exploring connections between science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. We have students who are using Connects, snap circuits, robotics. Students are able to create code and programming, which has been really exciting for them.
Hip Hop Unlock is an arts education and mentoring program that employs hip hop as a tool to educate and empower young people by using skills such as leadership development, cooperative economics, and knowledge of the music business. We have a 10-week program where they learn how to create a music CD from conception to completion.
Makeshop is a rich and supportive informal learning space for children and families to come together at the intersection of the DIY or do-it-yourself or do-it-together movement and the world of digital media and learning. You can do everything from sewing, woodworking, electronics, digital media. It really takes hands-on learning to another level.
Who's soldered before? Do a drop of solder.
Assemble is a creative learning environment where kids of all ages can experience and experiment through art, technology, science, and media through hands-on activities in social settings.
It's really important to have an environment that's creative for children, and this Entertainment Technology Academy provides that. We know that education's changing, that this type of learning, where we're engaging them in a different curriculum, is going to prepare them for the future.
The reason this class is unique is because it allows me to take different courses that the rest of the school doesn't offer, like graphic design, 3D design, things that are going to help me in college.
Danger, Bill Robinson, danger.
The Entertainment Technology Center is the premier graduate program that focuses on how using entertainment technologies across a variety of fields.
And what we like to do is go beyond entertainment and think about how they can be used for educational purposes so that we can make more engaging and immersive learning experiences.
The Fred Rogers Center is an academic center for program development, innovation, and issues awareness in early learning and children's media. Through our recent work with the National Association for the Education of Young Children, we released a position statement of recommendations on developmentally appropriate uses of digital media with children birth through age 8.
So the Center for Creativity, where teachers can come in a fun, non-threatening, casual environment and play with either new technologies or learn to use existing technologies in new ways.
At the Pittsburgh Technology Council, we formed the Creative Technology Network to bring innovation to scale and foster new economic development clusters. A lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with are developing games and applications that directly connect with education.
In Pittsburgh, we're working to develop an entire ecosystem that supports learning innovation. We're working as a connected learning community across sectors and toward common goals so that all of our region's children and youth can learn and be creative. And at the Sprout Fund, it's our job to support the people, the projects, and the organizations, and all those who strive to make Pittsburgh the best place on earth to be a kid.
So the really fun thing for kids, thank you. You can see, we're talking about dozens of public school districts, dozens of libraries, dozens of community centers, all working in a coordinated way, bringing real joy back to learning and connecting with kids in the things that interest their lives and that activate them forward in learning. And these three modern-day Fred Rogers are leading it in some extraordinary ways. You just heard at the end from Cathy Lewis-Long. It's my pleasure to introduce Cathy, and she can tell you more about it.
Thank you, Gregg, and thank you everyone for joining our session today. We're really excited to tell you more about the work that we're doing in Pittsburgh. It really started very much in an ad hoc, informal way through the Gregg Foundation's leadership of thinking about what happens when you bump up communities that are strong in learning and really a focus of early childhood and technology and what might be possible. And it began in a very ad hoc, kind of fluid way. And we realized as we gained momentum that we really needed some structure. And so just to back up for a moment, the work that we've been doing at the Sprout Fund has been to catalyze innovation through a mixture of grant making, community building, and storytelling. And it's really about building bridges and connections between the grassroots community of educators and innovators, designers, artists, developers, with the region's stakeholders coming out of institutions, philanthropy, policyholders, and really beginning to kind of bring the grassroots and the treetop community together in a way toward a shared goal that is really creating some tremendous change in Pittsburgh. As Gregg mentioned, for the past several years, we've been focusing our attention on remaking learning in Pittsburgh and really how to harness some of the incredible assets that we have in our community and the incredible innovators together to really build strong connections between the people and the institutions that are driving this change. So by working across the sectors, finding a way to harness the excellence in the innovations and leverage those community assets to create durable change in places like public schools that are incredibly hard to change. So our network, the Kids and Creativity Network, is loosely affiliated, but I would say highly collaborative. And networks are complicated because people have diverse missions. They have different working styles. They have sometimes competing interests. And what we found in a period of working in a more ad hoc way was that bringing some formalization to this effort by having an organization such as the Sprout Fund to work as a kind of connector and steward of the network, somebody really at a very basic level to be there to answer the phone, that you start to bring some strategic stewardship between the learning scientists, between industry, between schools and education centers, museums, libraries, in a way that can create some durable change. And when everybody has a shared interest, but there isn't somebody or an organization there to really drive those practices, it is harder to create that change. So the Sprout Fund has been working as a steward and as a connector of the Kids and Creativity Network in some pretty powerful ways. We see grant making as an important way to spur innovation, particularly at that catalytic level, how to take that idea into a solution and really drive the network's attention on issues that we think are worthy of investment. So as it relates to game designing, it's a great way to support game designers to do play testings in museums and libraries when we look at projects like the Make Shop, which has been such an exciting way to sort of reimagine children's museums. It starts with an idea, and in that instance, it started with an idea between the Entertainment Technology Center and the museum, and how could we have just that little bit of seed support that's necessary in order to really begin to think about museum spaces in different ways. But grants are only good in a certain moment in time for a certain project, and community building and really developing that community of practice of people that can dive deep on an issue has been very important. So for us, as the steward of this network, we're really active in hosting workshops and lunch and learns and affinity groups, again, in an effort to really build a set of communities of practice. A great example as it relates to the gaming space is work that we do with Zulama Learning and Drew to host Google Hangouts every month around gaming and learning. And so how can we just bring the people that are active in the community on a monthly basis together to really explore issues related to gaming and learning? Communications has been a big part of our work. How do you amplify the voices of the people working in this space? What are the practices? What are the stories? What are the projects? And so I encourage all of you to, I'm one slide behind, to follow our storytelling and our blog, remakelearning.org. It profiles the people, the projects, the ideas, the upcoming events, the deadlines, et cetera, all around different focus areas, and have a really active conversation going on around gaming and learning. So it's not any one of these services, but it's really taking them together, and it's the kind of stewardship of this work, and we believe has been a great model to create a sustainable and kind of structured way to support a system that really begins to drive change locally. So we see great benefit from network members that are finding greater level of connectivity among one another, people who are working in, no longer working in silos, but that are really beginning to collaborate in new and different ways. It's been very important to us that this work stay very authentic to the local neighborhood as Mr. Rogers' neighborhood and Pittsburgh as a community, but also really how to understand how to connect the work that we're doing locally into bigger movements in the field, into ways that other cities and other communities are beginning to work from a kind of ecosystem or an ecological perspective in networks. And the Kids and Creativity, which is kind of a homegrown network in Pittsburgh, has joined the work of some other cities through the Hive Learning Network, through the support of the MacArthur Foundation, to really begin to think about how do you harness the assets of a community within a community so that learning is anywhere, anytime, in and out of school. We all know that learning doesn't stop at 3 o'clock, so what is the role of the museums, the libraries, the out-of-school centers, online, unmediated experiences that can use cities as a context to really drive innovation? And so we see the work that we're leading in Pittsburgh as having kind of resonance in other cities, and really beginning to think about how do you function in a way that is hyperly local but globally connected. And I think that's the real opportunity with the Hive Global Network. Specifically, I wanted to just talk about gaming, since that's what we're here to talk about at this conference, as how does the Kids and Creativity Network go deep in its gaming and learning? And we're going to show in a little while the incredible work in a video of the Elizabeth Forward School. But it's an incredible story because it really was a visionary superintendent who, through our network, was able to connect with the Entertainment Technology Center to really begin to reimagine their school and what that setting was, and to meet kids where they are. This is how kids want to learn. This is how kids are learning today. So by developing a academy within their school in partnership with the Entertainment Technology Center, and I'm sure Drew will talk a little bit more about this, they have seen that school turn around, and they have seen that aha moment in a learner's eyes that all of a sudden, dropout rates are changing. Summer learning is picking up by, I think it's some crazy 500% has been the increase in their summer learning program. So gaming has been an incredible way to sort of take the pipeline that Elizabeth Forward was facing, that falling out of that pipeline, and recapture the imagination of its youth through their gaming academy, through the small lab that Gregg spoke about. But we have incredible other network partners. Those of you who are familiar with Pittsburgh will know the word YINS. So there's a great gaming program called Quest YINS, and it's a partnership with the Allegheny County Library Association to really begin to rethink and reimagine their summer learning and summer reading programs into a game-like experience. So I could go on and on, but I would encourage you to go to Remake Learning to learn more about the gaming work that we're doing locally. But I thought it would be nice to talk a little bit about some of the national partnerships that we've been able to establish by we're a great kind of petri dish or use case for other institutions and programs. So last summer, the Institute of Play partnered with educators for a Mobile Quest Lab, which was a 2-week camp on Carnegie Mellon's campus, and in partnership with the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, to really begin to train educators in game-based design thinking. And it's something that we're very excited and proud to say that we'll bring back this summer for a program called Teacher Quest, which is a professional development program for teachers that are interested in these gaming principles. So, prior to the network, there wasn't even a way to move this kind of work forward. How do you connect with educators? How do you play test? How do you reach the students that we're all interested in? It's been a great way to both connect at the institutional and university level with Carnegie Mellon, and with a lot of the graduate students and professors and researchers that are there. So there is no greater pleasure than mine to turn it over now to my good friend and colleague, Drew Davidson.
And she didn't go through all her slides.
And questions, sorry.
Go.
So we wanted to just pause here if anybody had anything that they're burning to ask before Drew delves into some of the work at Carnegie Mellon.
Because after that, no
And we
questions.
can't see you,
No judgment.
or I guess we can
Kind of see.
Any questions?
How long did this all take?
Yeah, so this doesn't happen overnight. This has been 7 years in the process. And when Cathy says it began in an informal way, it began with a lot of coffee meetings and pancake breakfasts with 2 people, a dozen people. I mean, it began with a community of interest, bringing together, as Cathy said, unlike minds in the sense that, you know, a gamer could be with a museum exhibit designer, could be with a teacher, and then beginning to find that common interest. And so it took a lot of years because you had trustees at a foundation that had to come to learn about the learning sciences different and why we should start making these financial bets on projects, let alone a network. You had an organization that had to step forward into a network and figure out how best to provide services to people like Michelle and Drew, and what is it that would support them as they're trying to change the world using gaming and other practices. So this is something that certainly didn't happen overnight.
And I think it was also really important for the network to see themselves within the design of our work. So it's not something that we plunked into Pittsburgh and everybody just seamlessly started to work together, but really doing a lot of listening and understanding, you know, what are the things that we could provide to the community, to people like Michelle and to Drew that they aren't already doing on their own. So what is that kind of summative value that people have when you're working together? Yes. Right, so Elizabeth Ford has seen, I mean, they can hardly take the demand and the calls of people wanting to understand, here's a rural school in kind of a Rust Belt town, and all of a sudden, they have completely turned their programming around. So, you know, one of the ways that we communicate that story is forums like this. Another way is, as I said, the Remake Learning blog is a really robust way to share the stories and amplify the voices of people working in that space. And then working through the Hive Global Network is another opportunity, is that, you know, what works in New York doesn't work in Chicago, doesn't work in Pittsburgh, doesn't work in San Francisco, but how to take some of those practices and remix them for a local context is a big part of that work. So again, none of this work, and it's been very important to us to be authentic to our own community, but what are the practices that can be shared and replicated in ways that work in other contexts.
And if I may, I'd add to that before we turn to Drew. So the Elizabeth Ford School District and the South Fayette School District are 2 of the 49 members of the League of Innovative Schools hosted by Digital Promise. And so you have 2 Pittsburgh area schools that are part of this national network. Plus, Cathy and her colleagues, with the incredible support of the MacArthur Foundation, are connected to the U.S. Department of Education, participate in meetings and conferences in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. In fact, Cathy was instrumental in her organization in hosting a national convening on digital badging that was held in Silicon Valley in February. And we're also staying close touch with the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House with respect to the Science Fair, their forthcoming Maker Fair, other ways that we can connect with national colleagues. Because it's partly, we want to be selfish, right? We're there for Pittsburgh's kids and Pittsburgh's teachers and the institutions, but we also want to contribute to this dialogue of remaking education everywhere.
I think there was another question. Yes?
You might want to talk about this at the end, but assessment and evaluation, what are you assessing and evaluating as you go?
Do you want to touch on the Elizabeth Forward outcomes, or do you want to wait till after?
Let me table that question. We're going to show you a video in just a bit, and I will give you some very specific examples to that. So Drew, let's turn to you.
Okay, cool. So like Gregg and Cathy set up so well, this is definitely a network that's working together. And one of the things that I think's inspiring about it, because I'm sure some of you out there going, well, we do stuff like that in our city, but there's this wonderful integration in Pittsburgh of people collaborating together that's having things happen to scale that we hope to share out. And I think a great question is, like, how do we share it beyond Western Pennsylvania? So I'm at Carnegie Mellon at the Entertainment Technology Center. I just want to talk about that briefly for those who don't understand what that is or don't know. Randy Pausch, one of the co-founders of the ETC, Last Lecture fame, yes. He used to like to say that he wanted the ETC to be the world's best playground with an electric fence. And what he meant by that was, we're really trying to teach design and development. And if you're really talking about good design process, creativity needs constraints. The extraordinary needs those boundaries. Because if students show up and they can do whatever they want, there's not much that's going to happen. But if you give them really well-defined constraints, they're going to hit up against those, and then that's where the creativity happens. And that's where the innovation and interesting ideas come. So, whoops, that was the wrong button. So just in a nutshell, in terms of details, what does that mean? We're a 2-year professional master's program. We're kind of like an MBA, but we focus on design and development. I joke with my colleagues in the industry, there's the suits and then there's the creatives. We're focused on the creatives. We try to take about 40% out of technology backgrounds, computer science, MECs, EEs, ECEs, 40% out of artistic backgrounds, 2D, 3D, visual effects, graphic design, and then 20% from wherever. Creative writing, music, theater, dance. We've had biology majors come to us because we want that mix. We want to put people together. We're really interested in interdisciplinary learning, and they're sort of forced to work on like Renaissance teams. One of the common misconceptions of some of our incoming students is like, I have to do everything. I'm like, no, we want you to be really good at what you do and then work with people who are really good at what they do and do something you couldn't do without each other. To match that, we have a very diverse faculty to help support those students. So it's a creativity and collaboration focus in our master's level. We want people to innovate on ideas. And they do hands-on projects. Gregg was sort of mentioning it. Our students are working with clients all the time. One of the projects was the feed game. Did anybody play the feed game this morning? Yeah, that's a group of students. We were working with Games for Change to create them a location-based game out in the park, and I joke with the students that they've been playtesting all semester, and if they playtest, it's going to be cold. It's an outdoor game, so they've always had cold weather. So if you really want some cold weather, have them come play your game somewhere. But we're really interested in global education. Carnegie Mellon has a wonderful international reputation. Over 50% of our students are international, and so we want that diversity as well. We're thinking about that diversity of perspectives. What's great about the ETC and its sort of interdisciplinary mix, we're probably 40% to 60% women to men as well. And we want, again, that mix is really important for us, and everybody's doing applied research projects. Our students have to make things. So what I love is we reward at MET. Our students win a Master's in Entertainment Technology Center when they graduate. Win, like it's a game. Anyways, what I like about that is it tells people what we're not. If you're somebody who's like, I just really want to take a lot of technical classes, that might be a Master's of Science. Or if you're an artist who really just wants to work on your portfolio, that's probably an MFA. If you just like writing papers, it's probably an MA. Or if you're really interested in business, MBA. So like, coming here and working on communication and collaboration. I bet you 90% of my mentoring and advice to students are how to get along, that sort of communication process as you're working on a team with a client who wants to know why it isn't green. And so you're like struggling with bad clients. And I think Games for Change was a good client, yes? All right. And then the end result for us is all about experience. Like Jesse Schell yesterday in his presentation about authenticating care or authentic caring. We're really interested about that experience that our students design for. We want that to be what we're aiming for in terms of the design process. What do you want us as players or guests or users to have with that experience and try to design for that? So maybe it's transformational, maybe it's just entertainment. But we really strive for that with our students. Specific to Games for Change, Jesse Schell again, wonderful book, second edition coming out soon. Plug for Jesse here. I know he got it in just this spring. I think they're aiming to have it ready so it's available for classes in the fall semester. So keep an eye out for the second edition, much improved. And he was joking, like in his first edition, he talks about Goldmaster CD-ROMs. Once upon a time, that was something you did. Not anymore. But Jesse really sort of coined the idea of transformational games for us. Thinking about games for impact, where you're trying to do more than just have it be an engaging experience. And I thought he talked very persuasively about that yesterday, so I don't want to cover that too much. But our idea is with transformational games is we do believe that you can play a game and it can make a difference. It can not only just change behavior, but it could change attitudes, get you think again. Asi, is one of our wonderful alums that we like to give a hard time because he does this thing called Games for Change. But when he was a student, he did Peacemaker. What a wonderful student pitch process. This idea of can we use a video game to get people to think about peace in the Middle East? And that was sort of counterintuitive. I think it was one of the central tent poles of Games for Change as it was starting several years ago. So we're hoping, and one of the wonderful things with Peacemaker in terms of changes in daily lives is they had the funding to get some experts from both sides, in terms of the Palestinian perspective and the Israeli perspective, but also just in terms of assessment, as somebody was asking. We actually sent it out and they did both play testing in terms of usability, but it's been played at the Perez Center for Peace with teens of both Palestinian and Israeli backgrounds, where often they find, as they walk in before they play the game, the attitude is like, well, if the other side was just more reasonable, this would all be solved. And then they play the game, which if you're not familiar with it, I won't go into too many details because I want to let Michelle get up here really soon. It really complicates that issue and shows you the complexity around everything that's going on. And they have found across the years that students who play this come out with a much more nuanced perspective on the issues involved. So talking about changes in daily lives right there through a video game. And it's a couple other examples. We had Feed here, Elizabeth Ford School District. One of the things that's been great with them is they're very, very open to experimenting. And they wanted to think about games, because one of the things we have found, and I think this came up with Jesse yesterday again with his caring, is if you bring learning to what they care about, they're going to come back with an investment in what they're doing. I think games do that just inherently in their nature. Like Jim G, and all the creative foundational work he did, games really in and of themselves are great learning tools. And if we start leveraging that in very elegant ways like Mary Flanagan has done, you can start seeing people get engaged and learn and get engaged in life. And a good example that we've done as well, we have a DARPA Engage project going on for the last 3 years. And just like Mary was saying yesterday in terms of data, we've been doing this for 3 years. The charge of the grant with DARPA was sort of STEM-based games for pre-K up to 3rd grade, trying to teach them some STEM learning skills. We've been really playtesting across those 3 years. Because making a game where you want to be able to assess and prove that it works, much less be an engaging experience, is a hard thing to do. I often give talks about how hard that is and what a big challenge we have in front of us. But we believe it's not impossible. And it is by we're just trying to teach them basic physics skills and iterate across these games. And you can check out this game if you want and the work they've done. They've got a great research on this, the teams that have been working on this, at etc.cmu.edu/engage. The games are upline and unplayable. So they're really just trying to teach some fundamental physics skills, but we've been working really hard across time to make sure it actually does what we hope to accomplish, both as they come out of playing the game, but be it a game that they want to play. That's a really, really tricky thing to do. So that's sort of like the ETC in a nutshell. And again, it happens within this relationship. We really believe in collaborations. And I think what's really important to sort of end this conversation is with Michelle King, because she's a teacher. Like, this is what we're really trying to reach out to these students and what they're doing. She teaches middle school. She teaches history. She does. I haven't looked at her slides. She does this awesome board game. So if you're talking about that, I want to go anymore. But Michelle is like in the trenches, really working with. And we find partnerships like that are really invaluable, because I noticed our college students were like, imagine you're 5 years old, and they kind of imagine that they're a tween. They're like, oh yeah, when I was 5, I liked smoking cigarettes. No, I kid. But it's interesting that their imagination doesn't go quite back to 5. But then when they start messing with the kids and playing and playtesting with the kids, they're like, oh my gosh, kids are brutal critics. They'll tell you if a game's not fun or if it's not doing anything. And so that's invaluable for us, and I think Michelle brings a really unique perspective. So without further ado, Michelle.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Just agree. Like I said to my kids, good afternoon, beautiful people. How are we? And then they just typically look at me. That's what it is to be the beautiful people, because I teach middle school. So I go by the Learning Instigator, and that's primarily because Beyonce and Shakira were already taken. But I'm really trying to bring learning back as something sexy and exciting. So one of the things teaching, I've taught over 17 years, and when I saw this graphic, it confirmed what I experience all the time, that learning is happening all the time and outside of my spaces, not just in these formal spaces. And when you see this graphic, it is very humbling that really the body of work, you're less than 20% is happening in these kind of formal spaces. That takes away the scarcity mindset, that learning only has to happen in my place. What can I fit into my place to happen? And then I begin to start thinking about abundance, which is now learning can happen anywhere at any time from any place. And now how can I connect people to that? So I had been looking at digital media and learning for a long time, studying their work, and I had this fortuitous meeting with Gregg at the Grable Foundation with the Western Pennsylvania Writing Project, and I start talking about learning as an ecosystem and how exciting. He's like, slow your roll, sister. That's pretty much what he said. And I was like, oh my gosh, this meeting is over. I was just like, fail. But he leaves, comes back with this plan, and that plan is the Kids+Creativity Network. And he says, do you know about this plan? I was like, I do. How do I not know? I'm like online, I'm checking out things, I'm excited about learning. He's like, look what we have. We have this foundation of bringing all these people together, really thinking about what's best for kids in our city. I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of doing what's best for kids, not just kids in my space, but kids all over our city, and ultimately kids all over the world. So I think about my work as a history teacher. What do I do? One of the things that often gets disconnected is what's happening in class. Oh, is this, does it have any implications in my life? And I want kids to start thinking that the work that's done in here is the work that we do as a part of a community, as a part of a society. So I started thinking, not just started, but I always looking at these things of how can you create learning experiences that actually have implications outside of this space and get kids really talking about the issues. They are going to inherit this earth. What responsibilities will we give them? Do they have practice in doing them? So we decided to think about this game my colleague and I designed. I'm in a class called Cultural Literacy. It's a blend of social sciences and English, and we teach together. And so we looked at this question last year. We've kept our 7th graders, and they're now 8th graders are with us. We looked at Jared Diamond's theory on guns, germs, and steel. And it looks at, does geography determine destiny? And we started building a game last year. This is probably the 8th iteration of our game. This became Colonial Thrive, where we tackled the question, when you have 5 European nations and 5 Native American groups coming together in the New World, could they coexist? And so we built this game focusing on these things. They looked at politics, economics, social systems, a very kind of complex game with competing interests. And one of the constraints that we had in the game was a failure to thrive line. No one could win the game unless all nations were above the failure to thrive line. What you start to get kids to do is like looking at the implications of decisions, looking at economic systems. Remember, all of these things have been built by us. How do they promote inequity? How do they promote cooperation? And that's essentially what our game tried to do. So we looked at things like, you could win the game in 2 ways, happiness and influence, and we even created a math equation on documenting what happiness is, looking at how well your citizens were doing, but as well as taking away things like if slavery were brought in and how that detracted from your civilization's ability to win. This game was built with the kids, not only just physically building the board, but also building the mechanics and testing out the mechanics of the game. So again, we're having a much, not just playing the game, but the design of the game is also a very powerful learning experience. So what I think learning should do is ask better questions, or questions that really get at the complexity of society and really get at what we want as a people, right? When we reflect back on our lives, we never think about, oh, I could have been cleaner, perhaps. Or maybe if I had just gotten 1650 on that SAT. No, we don't. We remember relationships, remember connections. And so have we made that space for our kids to be able to grow, inherit, and learn on our communities? And I look at the Pittsburgh Kids+Creativity Network as part of that, helping to answer that question, which is to bridge people, bridge institutions, bridge us together to build a thriving city, not just for my kids, but for kids all around. So thank you for your time.
So I think that you would agree with me that these are 3 amazing modern-day Fred Rogers. They are extraordinary people. It's important that we respect the time for the festival, so I think we want to end with this great example of the Elizabeth Ford School District. And let me just set it up briefly for you, because we've mentioned the school district a few times, but what you have to understand is that this school district sits in the rusting part of our old rusting industrial valley. For as much as the city of Pittsburgh has remade itself, there's still so much work to be done for so many families and so many children. And so Elizabeth Ford sits in the Monongahela Valley, a place that's partly industrial, partly rural, certainly not a place that you would expect the future to be taking hold. And what happened is that Superintendent Bart Rocco met some gamers from the Entertainment Technology Center. And he subsequently met people like Cathy and Michelle and so many of their other colleagues in the Kids+Creativity Network. And they've transformed a really middling, sort of fairly poor performing school district into one whose dropout rate went from 28 students a year to 1, whose math scores are up 4%, whose reading scores are up 3%, whose summer registration registration is up 500%, and is now one of just 49 school districts in the entire country and in the world that is part of the League of Innovative Schools. It's an extraordinary story, and it starts with gamers connecting in really authentic ways with educators. And so let us tell you that story.
We always talk about the future of education.
And the future is here, the future is now for our kids.
A lot of schools are looking to cut programs. Here at Elizabeth Ford, we're really trying to add innovation and remake education.
We're taking technology and incorporating that, so it's no longer just paper and pencil and books.
But it's also about the way that teachers approach learning in the classroom.
It's not the teacher giving them information and having the children spit it back.
They're now active learners in the space too.
Teachers are more facilitators.
Our interaction with Carnegie Mellon University's Entertainment Technology Center really started the implementation of some of these creative learning spaces for children. And I've seen a direct correlation, how kids have performed in these types of classes, and they go back in their grades in the other classes, the more traditional classes improve.
This is important and exciting for the community at Elizabeth Forward.
This is a small rural district in southwestern Pennsylvania.
We struggle financially.
We've been so fortunate to have really great support groups to help us.
We have a great partnership with Carnegie Mellon.
We got California University involved.
The Benedum Foundation.
The Sprout Fund.
Mickey McManus from Maya Design.
Folks from Gregg, Behr.
We've talked to companies all across the country.
They sort of gave us just that little push to say, okay, go to the outer reaches of your ideas and dreams.
Last year in September, we opened our Dream Factory.
The Dream Factory is a combination of 3 classes that were previously separated: the art room, the tech ed room, and computers.
All 3 teachers collaborate and bring together art and engineering.
When it's hands-on learning, it's something that you want to do.
What we need are measurements. When you have a board, take a look at your board.
I think it adds to our traditional wood shop, metal shop.
Students are programming interactive games, building robots.
Do they want to do 3D printing? Do they want to do painting? Do they want to do sculpture?
This is not a gifted program. It's not an after-school activity. Every kid is getting this in our school.
We've been creating a lot of unique learning spaces in the district, and we thought we needed to push some of these activities down to the elementaries.
I wanted to change my instruction and ultimately the classroom so that I could meet the needs of every kid in here.
I like it. It's cool. It's colorful. It's nice. We work together as a table to figure stuff out.
You can go to the support center if you need help, if you don't get something straight away.
The new classrooms really allow the teachers to teach to individual students, and it allows the students to learn more at their own pace. The Embodied Learning Lab is a miniature version of a small lab here in the elementary setting.
The students are really excited to come into the lab because they get to burn off some of that energy and move around while they're learning topics that traditionally would be difficult in a classroom.
We're using a Kinect camera, we're using a flat screen TV, and a PC to make this room come alive.
We can see these rooms being put into every elementary school in our district.
We've also instituted a one-to-one learning initiative using iPads.
Every kid gets an iPad.
We wanted to give every student an iPad from K to 12.
We have our books on our iPad so we don't have to carry them around.
iPads go anywhere. They're learning. They can learn anywhere.
Seeing the students using iPads in the Dream Factory has been amazing. Kids can do 3D design on an app, print it to a 3D printer.
We're all just very used to it. It has become just what we do and how we learn.
First we started with the small lab, then we got the 3D printers, and now each student has their own iPad. I think it's just going to keep growing and growing.
Now that we have some of these unique spaces, how do we as a school district change other classrooms and other environments to engage children?
Providing these programs are going to better prepare these kids, whether they choose to go on to college or just straight into workforce.
They're not going to be afraid to use the new technology that's coming down the road in 2020, 2030.
They're going to be a step ahead as far as engineering and computer science and, even the future of art.
Creating an environment and using that technology really can help children, and that's really the goal in the district, is to help children learn and grow and be productive members of our society. And if we know it works, we have to find a way to replicate that.
So Michelle, Drew, Cathy, any final comments, things that you would want to share with the audience?
I would just say that the cities are great laboratories to harness all of the assets and to reach out to the innovators that are in the museums, the libraries, the schools, artists, designers, and really find a way together to meet learners where they are through the tools and the practices that they like to use. And for our city, it's been great to have the support of the foundation community and the support of my organization to really bring some organization and some stewardship to that effort to really go further.
I would say you have to have, and partly because I'm a teacher, but you need to have teachers at the table. There are a lot of people like myself who are probably working in the dark, who've been doing this kind of work, who've really been supporting kids who are pro-learning, and we have a system that constrains that. Schools have been very good at cannibalizing change, and there are probably a lot of us, and like our network, that has the courage to try to do something different to remake learning. So I really believe at any of these opportunities to really have educators at the table. They want to discuss, they want to talk about it, but oftentimes they're constrained by the schedule. You know, they might have a meeting at noon, and you're like, I'm teaching, I can't get, I can't really leave the kids in the room and go to these events. Smoke if you got them. But really, can we have more opportunities where teachers really get to be at the table and co-create? I mean, I think that's where you really you understand the wisdom of what's happening in the classroom, along with, say, a game designer who has their wisdom, or any kind of designers or community people. And actually, you can create something quite beautiful. But working separately, I think it makes it very challenging to create really effective learning opportunities.
And just like Gregg said, being respectful of the festival's time, we're all around, so come visit us so we can let the next one come on, and we're happy to chat with anybody. So welcome
So thank you for joining us, for listening to this story. Come join us in Fred Rogers' neighborhood of the city of Pittsburgh. Find ways to connect with us. Go online to remakelearning.org. We'd love to connect with you all as we transform lives for kids and educators. Thank you.